Not just green, but smart as well. That's the goal for the Tianjin Eco-City in northern China.
Walking through Manhattan feels like a trip through history, but a flight to Shanghai feels like a trip to 2126. While New York navigates 1920s-era gridlock, Chinese megacities are utilizing magnetic rails at 268 miles per hour and AI that manages 12,000 intersections simultaneously. With 3.5 billion metro riders, tripling New York City's capacity, the scale is staggering. But can this growth stay green on a planet that's facing a lot of challenges? Number 10. Tianjin Eco-City. While the mainstream media is busy arguing over plastic straws, something much more massive and unsettlingly efficient is happening on a salt-covered wasteland near the Bohai Sea. Walking through these streets, it feels like the architecture itself has a pulse, operating on a level of synchronization that feels less like urban planning and more like a high-tech ritual. The buildings here are built like giant batteries, interconnected by a smart grid that doesn't just sit there waiting for you to flip a light switch. According to technical data from the Keppel Corporation, the lead developer, this invisible neural network has managed to slash emissions by a staggering 60%. The structures are practically high-fiving each other with surplus electrons, where your apartment might lend its extra solar power to a neighbor's electric vehicle while you're at work. Down at the port, the landscape is filled with autonomous cranes and self-driving trucks that move with the eerie, coordinated grace of a well-oiled robot dance party. These machines are powered by the same energy parties happening on the grid, fueled by the sun and wind captured just blocks away. Based on the master plan files, a centralized brain monitors every pipe and wire in real time, catching leaks before they even happen. It makes you wonder if you'd live in a city that recycles your waste into Wi-Fi speed, or if the constant surveillance required for that level of harmony makes you a little uneasy. As we look at these glowing grids and drone shots of a city that feels alive, we have to realize that this is only the foundation. Eco-smarts are cool, but what if factories ran themselves like a well-oiled robot dance party? Number 9. Suzhou Industrial Park. Forget bosses yelling, "Here." Machines whisper updates and crank out perfection without breaking a sweat. When you enter a building in this district, it feels like the air itself is being managed by a brain you can't see. The structures here are built like giant, high-tech puzzles, where every aluminum panel and glass curtain wall is designed to do more than just look sleek. They act as protective shells for a massive, integrated digital platform. Here is the thing. According to recent reports from the World Economic Forum on their global lighthouse network, this place is essentially a living blueprint for the future of work. Picture a factory where the lights are dim because the machines don't need them to see. These buildings are designed around the concept of a digital twin, a virtual replica that lives through every possible scenario before a single physical part ever moves. Based on the technical files from the INVT Suzhou facility, the entire supply chain is so connected that the factory can pivot its production in seconds if a sensor detects a microscopic delay. It is actually almost humorous to imagine a human supervisor trying to jump in and fix things when the AI has already calculated the solution before the person even noticed a problem. Everything from the logistics to the quality testing happens with zero room for error, leaving the halls as quiet and organized as a library. You have to wonder if a world that functions so perfectly without us feels a bit hollow. But in Suzhou, that level of autonomy isn't a gimmick, it's the standard. Factories here dream in code, but wait until you see the bridges that actually fix themselves. Number 8. Wuhan. Walking across a bridge in Wuhan felt like standing on a giant living sensor that was constantly talking to the cloud. While other cities spent decades debating a single subway line, Wuhan completely flipped the script by laying down over 300 kilometers of metro track In just 15 years, this city didn't just build a transport network, it staged a total takeover of the Yangtze River, turning a massive geographical barrier into a playground for high-speed connectivity. Based on structural engineering data from the Wuhan Municipal Construction Bureau, the real secret was in the thousands of high-precision sensors embedded deep within the concrete. These bridges were built like a digital nervous system, where the infrastructure actually tattled on itself the moment a microscopic stress fracture appeared. It was almost like the spans had regular therapy sessions with a central server, whispering about every vibration and thermal expansion to ensure the human population remained completely safe without even knowing the conversation was happening. According to technical reports from China Railway Major Bridge Engineering Group, this proactive thinking turned the Yangtze from a dangerous obstacle into a managed asset. They even started experimenting with self-healing materials that could potentially fix small fissures in the tunnel walls without a human ever picking up a tool. It was a massive flex of technical truth that proved a city could outgrow its own limitations through sheer engineering will. Wuhan showed that when you combined massive scale with microscopic precision, you got a foundation that didn't just exist, it thrived. But hold on to your hats, because as we move from the ground up, we are about to see how the sky itself became the next frontier for this high-speed evolution. Number 7. Guangzhou. 71 feet per second elevators and VR-tested skyscrapers turned Guangzhou into a high-speed adrenaline rush where the sky was no longer a limit, but a playground. While the self-healing bridges of Wuhan were securing the ground, the narrative of China's vertical evolution shifted toward the sky in Guangzhou. This city didn't just build upwards because it transformed the act of going to the office into a world record feat of engineering. The CTF Finance Center became the stage for this vertical revolution, featuring Hitachi elevators that traveled at a staggering 71 feet per second. To put that in perspective, these lifts moved faster than your ex's ghosting speed when things actually started getting serious. It was a vertigo-inducing accomplishment that made traditional Western skyscrapers feel like they were standing still, and it proved that the limits of vertical transportation were being rewritten in real time. But how did they achieve such? Well, this speed involved more than just powerful motors, because the technical truth lay in the physics of comfort. Engineers used permanent magnet synchronous motors and a specialized air pressure adjustment system to ensure that your ears didn't pop or your stomach didn't drop while hurtling toward the 111th floor. They even integrated active mass dampers at the top of these towers, massive weights controlled by sensors that shifted to counteract the sway of typhoons. It meant the building was fighting the wind in real time to keep the structure stable. The Canton Tower stood nearby as a twisted masterpiece of steel, acting as a beacon for a city that refused to follow standard geometric rules. But the real hidden truth wasn't just in the height of the steel beams, because it was in the way these structures were integrated into the city's wider vision through Building Information Modeling, BIM. These buildings weren't isolated icons, but were parts of a massive interconnected network that prioritized movement and efficiency above all else. What if we tested every skyscraper in a total VR simulation before we even broke ground? In Guangzhou, that wasn't just a suggestion because it became the actual blueprint. They used VR and digital simulations to walk through the plumbing, electrical, and structural systems before a single bag of cement was poured, which was how they managed to build such complex structures without the massive delays that usually plague Western projects. But why? It was a calculated effort to maximize the value of every square inch of land in the Pearl River Delta. By building smarter and faster, Guangzhou ensured it could house millions of professionals without the horizontal sprawl that kills productivity. They turned the marvel of a skyscraper into a functional, high-speed node in a global trade network. Are you ready to trade the stairs for a machine that beats a race car in a vertical sprint? Number 6. Chengdu. Chengdu introduced a digital twin so accurate it could predict your power bill 3 years out, proving that the mystery of the future has been systematically dismantled by algorithms. As the focus traveled inland to Chengdu, the speed of Guangzhou's elevators was replaced by the speed of data. This city didn't just build a digital map, it created a city information model, CIM, with centimeter-level precision. This basically meant they had a virtual copy of the city that was so accurate you could see a loose brick in an alleyway or a flickering streetlight from a computer screen miles away. This wasn't just for show, because the city used this twin to pre-live its growth before a single brick was laid in the physical world. If you are wondering how this system works, well, me too. This system relied on a combination of LiDAR scanning, 5G data streams, and BIM integration. They ran simulations to predict how the city would grow, how traffic would flow during a holiday weekend, and most impressively, they used it to provide utility forecasts. This system was designed to predict the energy and water needs of entire districts 3 years into the future based on urban growth patterns and climate trends. By the time a new apartment complex was finished, the city had already allocated the power and water it would need years in advance. It was the ultimate peak in the storyline of pre-living cities, where the chaos of urban expansion was replaced by scientific calculation. The why behind this was a desire for total urban harmony, often referred to as the Park City concept. Chengdu didn't want to become a concrete jungle because they mandated a 40% greenery ratio for all new developments. They wanted to ensure that as the concrete grew, the quality of life didn't plummet. By using the digital twin to foresee potential bottlenecks and environmental stressors before they happened, Chengdu managed to maintain a balance that felt almost impossible for a megacity of its size. The technical truth was that they were no longer guessing about urban planning because they were calculating it with the same rigor a scientist uses in a lab. The receipts were visible in the way the city managed to stay green and breathable while hosting millions of residents and thousands of tech firms. They turned the what of a megacity into the how of a lived experience that felt seamless and planned. The level of control was breathtaking and perhaps a little unsettling for those of us used to the beautiful mess of unplanned cities. The reality was that Chengdu was no longer waiting for the future to arrive because it had already simulated it and built the infrastructure to match. We've seen the speed and the sims, but wait until you see the central nervous system that treats an entire city like a single urgent heartbeat. Number 5. Hangzhou. While we were all busy trying to figure out how to navigate a simple roundabout, Hangzhou was already operating under the watchful eye of a centralized AI that controlled the literal pulse of the entire urban sprawl. This was not just some glorified GPS, because it was a massive, integrated neural network that synchronized every traffic light, camera, and public service into one breathing entity. One of the most insane receipts from this system was how it handled life and death emergencies. The AI actually calculated the fastest route and cleared every single traffic light for ambulances before the paramedics even sat in their seats. This resulted in a 15% drop in overall congestion, which made the city feel like it was breathing properly for the first time in decades. The integration went even deeper than just moving cars, because Hangzhou deployed an AI mental health platform that reached over 1.8 million people. It showed that the brain was not just concerned with asphalt and steel, but with the actual well-being of the people living on them. By analyzing patterns in public service usage and digital footprints, the city could identify where social pressure was peaking and deploy resources to match. It was a masterclass in how a city could use data as a form of preventative medicine. If your city could predict a traffic jam or a mental health crisis before it happened, would you feel safer? Or would you feel like you were living inside a glass box? The reason behind Hangzhou's dominance in this field was a total commitment to digital governance. They treated data like a public utility, just like water or electricity, ensuring that every byte of information was recycled to make the city run smoother. This involved thousands of miles of fiber optics and millions of sensors that fed back to a central hub that never slept. It was a massive flex of technical coordination that proved that when you removed human error from urban management, the results looked like pure magic. Which part of a sentient city sounds most useful for your daily grind? The traffic clearing or the invisible safety net? Number 4. Shenzhen. Shenzhen pulled off an all-EV blitz that turned the urban soundscape from a roar of engines into a quiet, futuristic hum of high-tech machinery. If Hangzhou was the brain, then Shenzhen was the muscle of China's hardware revolution. They did not just encourage electric cars because they mandated them for every single taxi and bus in the city years before the rest of the world even started building charging stations. It created a reality where the air was cleaner and the streets were quieter, despite being home to over 17 million people. But the real hidden truth was how money essentially disappeared from the physical world in Shenzhen. Everything was cashless and based on advanced facial recognition, which meant your face was literally your wallet. How this transition happened was brutal. It was an efficient policy shift that swapped out over 16,000 buses for electric models in a single move. But the technical truth went even further into the low-altitude economy, where drones became part of the logistics network. In Shenzhen, you didn't just wait for a delivery driver to navigate traffic because a Meituan drone could drop your lunch at a designated kiosk in under 10 minutes using AI-coordinated flight paths. It was a level of efficiency that made traditional delivery feel like a relic of the Stone Age. Face scanning for your morning coffee was either the ultimate convenience or a creepy step too far, depending on how you valued your privacy, but can you argue with the speed? And that was just one thing. The why behind Shenzhen's aggressive tech push was to cement its status as the Silicon Valley of hardware. They proved that a city could be a living laboratory for every new piece of tech that came off the assembly line. The receipts were visible in the lack of exhaust fumes and the seamless way millions of people navigated their lives without ever touching a physical coin or waiting for a delivery bike. It was a peek in the story of how machines were no longer just making our products, but were actually managing our existence with a silent, electric precision. Number 3. Chongqing. Chongqing was the place where a GPS was basically a liar because your destination sat 20 floors above a road you couldn't even see. It was a 3D cyberpunk maze where trains literally punched through the middle of apartment buildings at Liziba Station without waking the neighbors. You saw 5-layer flyovers that looked like a bowl of spaghetti and bridges that towered hundreds of feet over the Yangtze River. It was a city that defied every law of traditional navigation, making you feel like you were walking through a level of Inception. The streets were stacked on top of each other, creating a vertical world where you could enter a building on the first floor and exit onto a busy highway from the 10th. It was the ultimate visual receipt of what happened when a city refused to let mountains or rivers stop its expansion. Number 2. Shanghai. Shanghai didn't just use rails. It used magnets to fly at 268 miles per hour while you sat back and watched the world blur into a high-speed dream. The maglev was the undisputed king of transport, covering 30 kilometers in just 7 minutes with a stability that felt like floating on air. But the engineering flex didn't stop at the tracks because they built a luxury hotel 88 meters deep into an abandoned coal quarry. The intercontinental wonderland featured underwater rooms and a literal waterfall that crashed down the side of the rock face, turning an industrial scar into a masterpiece. It looked like a Bond villain's secret lair, proving that Shanghai was the master of turning impossible geography into a high-end reality. Number 1. Xiong'an. Xiong'an was the city that lived beneath itself, featuring a massive network of hidden tunnels that handled the mess of urban life, so the surface stayed perfectly clean. It was built from scratch to be the ultimate relief valve for Beijing. But the real magic happened in the city underground. All logistics, electricity, and even garbage disposal moved through a subterranean web of autonomous pipes and roads. It meant the streets above were silent, green, and completely free of delivery trucks, creating a reality that felt more like a quiet park than a bustling megacity. It was the final boss of urban planning, where the most advanced tech was hidden away, so that humans could finally enjoy a world that wasn't choked by its own infrastructure. From twins to brains, China's playbook is simple. Simulate first, build flawless. We have just toured 10 cities where the future is no longer a guess because it has become a cold, calculated reality. Which city blows your mind the most?